Question 15. A consumer magazine surveyed people who had sought a psychologist's help with a personal problem. Of those responding who had received treatment for 6 months or less, 20% claimed that the treatment made things a lot better. Of those responding who had received longer treatment, 36% claimed that the treatment made things a lot better. Therefore, psychological treatment lasting more than 6 months is more effective than shorter-term treatment. All right, so argument or facts. Clearly, we have an argument. Structural indicator, therefore, introduces our conclusion that psychological treatment lasting more than 6 months is more effective than shorter-term treatment. And how do we know that? Well, we have this survey, right, where of those who received treatment for 6 months or less, 20% claimed that the treatment made things a lot better. But those who received longer treatment, 36% claimed that the treatment made things a lot better. So you notice the differences between less than 6 months or greater than 6 months in terms of this psychological treatment. And you notice that for people who received treatment for less than 6 months, only 20% claim that the treatment made things a lot better. Whereas for those receiving treatment for over 6 months, 36% claim that the treatment made things a lot better. So you notice we have a cause and effect argument here. There is an observed effect that this author is trying to explain to us. And what is this observed effect? And you notice it's the difference in the response between these two groups. Only 20% for treatments of less than 6 months versus 36% for those who received treatments of over 6 months, saying that the treatment made things a lot better. And the author's proposed cause for this observed effect is that treatment lasting more than 6 months is more effective than shorter-term treatment. So now that we have a very clear understanding of this argument, let's proceed to the question stem. Which one of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the argument? So we have a weakened question, cause and effect argument, looking for an answer choice that weakens this argument that psychological treatment lasting more than 6 months is more effective than shorter-term treatment based on this evidence that 20% of those who received the treatment for less than 6 months versus 36% of those who received treatment for over 6 months said that the treatment made things a lot better. So let's take a look at A. Of the respondents who had received treatment for longer than 6 months, 10% said that the treatment made things worse. Great. So what? That is completely irrelevant because 36% of them still said that it made things a lot better, and that's the difference. It was 20% before, now it's 36%. This idea that 10% said that it made things worse does not help us, so A would be eliminated. Moving to B, patients who had received treatment for longer than 6 months were more likely to respond to the survey than were those who had received treatment for a shorter time. Does B weaken? Very popular answer choice among students. They think it does weaken by showing an alternate cause. It's not that treatment lasting more than 6 months was actually more effective than treatment lasting for less than 6 months, but rather that those who were in treatment for more than 6 months were more likely to respond to a survey. And that's why we see this difference between 20% and 36%, not because it was actually more effective. But the problem with B is that the passage already takes into account the fact that certain people might respond differently. And if you notice, the beginning of the third sentence of the passage says, of those responding. So B actually does not weaken because we're already considering the fact of those who responded, and of those who responded, we saw this difference, 20% less than 6 months, 36% over 6 months, saying that the treatment made things a lot better. B is a trap answer. You're overlooking that the passage already told you of those responding, so B would be eliminated. Moving to C. Patients who feel they're doing well in treatment tend to remain in treatment, while those who are doing poorly tend to quit earlier. Does that weaken? And it does weaken by pointing out an alternate cause, not that it's more effective, but rather the reason we see this difference in percentage is that those who feel the treatment is not working tend to quit earlier than those who believe that they're doing well in treatment. So, what C does is it shows us an alternate cause, that it's not that it's more effective. That's not why we see 36% versus 20%, but rather that those who don't think it's working quit earlier than those who feel the treatment is doing them any good. So C does weaken by pointing out an alternate cause for the observed effect. So C would be the correct answer. But just making sure, checking D, patients who were dissatisfied with their treatment were more likely to feel a need to express their feelings about it and thus to return the survey. Well, if anything, that tends to strengthen this argument because those who did poorly were more likely to respond, but we still saw this difference of 36% versus 20%. So D definitely doesn't weaken, so D is out. And then lastly, checking E, many psychologists encourage their patients to receive treatment for longer than 6 months. Again, completely irrelevant. We have no idea why they're doing that. Are they doing that because they feel it's more likely to make things a lot better? Or are they doing that because they want to charge you more by getting you to go to therapy for longer than 6 months? So again, irrelevant, doesn't tell us why these psychologists are telling their patients to receive treatment for longer than 6 months. So again, the problem with E is that we do not know why they're recommending this. So E would be eliminated, does not weaken. Again, confirming that C here would be the correct answer by pointing out a possible alternate explanation to this observed effect. It's not that it's actually making things a lot better and thus more effective, but rather that those who feel they're doing poorly in treatment tend to quit earlier, and that's why we see a higher percentage of people saying that the treatment made things a lot better after 6 months than we did before.